The building was calm, bright, and silent, the kind of place where worries usually stayed outside. He thought the day was over. Another long evening, another finished task. Then a small voice interrupted everything. Soft, careful, almost afraid to exist. She did not cry. She did not shout. She only asked to stay. Something about her eyes said this was not imagination, not a story. Just truth whispered too quietly for the world to notice. He almost ignored it, almost looked away, almost chose comfort over concern. But sometimes life places a moment in front of us that tests who we really are. And sometimes, believing one frightened child can change more than just one night. Listen closely. This is the story of fear, courage, and the power of being heard. The building had already begun to empty, the kind of quiet that settles in when people leave with tired thoughts and unfinished plans. Lights reflected softly off the glass walls, turning the city outside into a blur of moving colors. He stood near the entrance, waiting for a call to end, confident that nothing unexpected could happen in a place designed for order and safety. This was his world. Predictable. Controlled. Safe. Then he felt it. Not a sound, not a touch, but the strange awareness of being watched. He lifted his eyes, expecting to see a security guard or an employee passing by. Instead, he noticed a small figure standing just inside the doorway. She was so still that for a moment he wondered if she had been there all along. Her shoes were dusty, her school bag looked too heavy for her shoulders, and her hands clutched the straps as if letting go would make everything fall apart. She did not rush toward him. She did not cry or call out. She simply stood there, gathering courage in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely louder than the hum of the building. "May I stay here for a little while?" The question was polite, almost practiced, yet something in her tone carried a weight far beyond her age. He glanced around, expecting someone else to appear. A parent, a teacher, anyone who belonged with her. No one came. The doors behind her slid closed with a soft sound, sealing off the street. The girl swallowed and lifted her eyes to his, searching his face as if he held the answer to something much larger than her question. "Someone is following me," she added quietly. He felt a brief flicker of doubt rise in his mind. Children imagine things. Fear could grow in long afternoons and lonely walks. This building was watched, protected, measured in cameras and guards. Everything about it promised safety. He told himself there was no reason to worry. And yet, the way her shoulders remained tense, the way her eyes kept drifting toward the glass, refused to let him dismiss her words so easily. Outside, the city continued as usual. Cars passed. Lights changed. Reflections moved across the glass like shifting shadows. He followed her gaze without realizing he was holding his breath. In that moment, the calm of the lobby felt fragile, as if it could break with a single wrong choice. He understood then that what happened next would depend on whether he listened or turned away. He asked her to sit near the reception desk, close to the light, where the polished floor reflected every movement. She obeyed but did not relax. Her feet barely touched the ground, and her fingers stayed locked around the straps of her bag as if it were the only solid thing she trusted. He tried to speak calmly, choosing words the way one chooses steps on thin ice. "Where did you come from?" he asked. She answered without hesitation. "From school. I always walked the same way." Today he was there again. Again. The word lingered. He studied her face, expecting confusion or exaggeration, but her expression stayed steady. Not dramatic. Not pleading. Just certain. She told him how the streets felt different when someone walked too close for too long. How footsteps began to match her own. How stopping made the sound stop too. How starting again made it follow. He told himself it could still be coincidence. Cities were full of strangers. Patterns appeared when fear searched for them. He almost said something reassuring and final, something that would end the conversation. But before he could, she turned her head slightly toward the glass wall. "Do you see him now?" she asked. He followed her gaze. At first there was nothing unusual. Reflections of passing cars stretched and bent across the surface. Lights flickered as doors opened somewhere behind them. Then something darker settled among the reflections. Still, unmoving. A shape that did not belong to the flow of the street. His chest tightened. He took a step closer to the glass, pretending curiosity. The shape remained. Not close enough to touch the door. Not far enough to disappear. Just there. The girl did not speak again. She did not need to. Her silence said everything. The calm space around them suddenly felt exposed, as though the glass were thinner than it looked. He realized how easily he might have sent her away minutes earlier. How close safety and danger had stood side by side without anyone noticing. He felt a shift inside himself then. doubt gave way to something heavier. Responsibility. Whatever was happening outside no longer mattered as much as the fact that she had trusted him with her fear. And he knew with absolute clarity that pretending nothing was wrong was no longer an option. The seconds that followed felt stretched, as if time itself had slowed to watch what he would do next. He did not rush for help immediately. He did not want to frighten her more than she already was. Instead, he shifted his position slightly, placing himself between her and the glass without making it obvious. The gesture was small, almost unconscious, yet it changed the air around them. She noticed. Her shoulders lowered a fraction, though her eyes never left the reflection. The shape outside moved just enough to confirm it was real. Not a trick of light. Not a passing shadow. A presence that waited, patient and aware. He asked her how long this had been happening. She spoke in short sentences, careful and precise. Days that felt longer than they should. Corners where she slowed down to see if the footsteps slowed too. Moments when she pretended to tie her shoe just to watch from the corner of her eye. Each memory came out without emotion, which somehow made it worse. He felt a quiet anger rise in him. Not loud or explosive, but steady and focused. He thought of how many times he had walked these streets without fear, how many times he had assumed safety was guaranteed simply because buildings were tall and lights were bright. Listening to her, he understood how different the world could feel when you were small and alone. The figure outside shifted again, closer this time, then stopped. He resisted the urge to stare. He knew attention could invite action. Instead, he kept his voice low and even, telling her she was not alone now. That she had done the right thing by coming inside. That she would not have to decide what to do next by herself. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. In that quiet moment, surrounded by polished surfaces and silent cameras, he realized this was no longer just about keeping a building secure. It was about choosing to stand between fear and someone who had carried it alone for far too long. And he understood that once you truly see something like this, you cannot unsee it. He moved with intention now, every action deliberate. He lowered himself to her level so she would not have to look up, so his voice could reach her without sounding distant or rushed. He told her she was safe here, not as a promise made lightly, but as a responsibility he was choosing to carry. She watched his face closely as if weighing the truth of his words. Slowly, the tight grip on her bag loosened just a little. He signaled to the security staff without drawing attention, a subtle motion practiced over years of quiet authority. The room did not change, yet everything felt different. The light seemed harsher, the glass more fragile. Outside, the figure remained where it was, neither advancing nor leaving, as though waiting for something to break. Her voice returned, softer than before. She explained how she had tried to ignore the feeling at first, how she told herself not to be afraid. How adults often said fear was something to outgrow. She spoke of choosing longer routes home, of counting steps, of pretending to talk to someone who was not there just to feel less alone. Each word carried a weight that pressed against his chest. He felt something unfamiliar tighten inside him. Regret. Not for what he had done, but for how close he had come to doing nothing. He imagined how easily her voice could have been lost in the echo of the building, how easily her fear could have been dismissed as inconvenience. The thought unsettled him more than the presence outside ever could. He reassured her again, not with empty comfort, but with action. Calls were being made. Doors were being watched. She would not leave alone. As he spoke, he felt the shift from suspense to something deeper. A fragile trust forming in the space between them. In that moment, he understood that courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in the decision to believe someone who had learned to speak softly just to survive. The waiting felt heavier than the fear itself. Every sound seemed louder now. The soft hum of the lights. The distant echo of doors opening somewhere deeper in the building. She stayed close to him, not touching, but near enough that he could sense her presence like a quiet question that had not yet been answered. He realized how much strength it had taken for her to walk through those doors alone and ask for help without knowing what the response would be. He spoke to her gently, asking small questions that gave her something steady to hold on to. What she liked at school. Which subjects made her smile. She answered carefully at first, then with a little more ease, as if talking about ordinary things helped her remember that fear did not own every part of her. Still, her eyes returned again and again to the glass. Outside, the street looked ordinary, almost peaceful. That was what made it unsettling. Danger rarely announced itself. It blended in. He thought of how many people must have walked past that same spot without noticing anything wrong. How many chances the world had to protect her without realizing it was needed. When help arrived, he felt relief mixed with resolve. This was no longer just about removing a threat. It was about restoring something that had been taken from her without permission. Her sense of safety. Her trust in adults. Her belief that speaking up mattered. She listened as plans were explained, her small face serious and attentive. When someone told her she had done the right thing, her eyes filled but she did not cry. Instead, she nodded as if storing those words somewhere deep for later. He understood then that this moment would stay with her for a long time. And he hoped with everything in him that what stayed most was not the fear, but the knowledge that when she finally spoke, someone chose to listen. The night ended quietly, without drama or raised voices, but its impact lingered long after the doors closed again. She sat wrapped in warmth, her bag resting safely at her feet, no longer clutched like a shield. When her mother arrived, breathless and shaken, the girl did not run or cry. She simply stood and walked into her arms, steady and sure, as if something inside her had finally settled. He watched the reunion from a respectful distance, feeling a softness he had not expected. The mother listened, tears forming as the story unfolded, her hands never leaving her daughter's shoulders. Gratitude filled her eyes, not loud or overwhelming, just deep and sincere. In that moment the building felt different. Not just a place of business but a place where someone had been protected when it mattered most. Before leaving, the girl turned back. She looked at him with the same serious eyes that had first caught his attention, but now there was something new there. Relief, trust, a quiet confidence. She smiled, small but real, and lifted her hand in a gentle wave. He returned it, feeling a warmth spread through him that no success or achievement had ever given him. Long after they were gone, he remained where he was, thinking about how close the world had come to missing something important. How a soft voice had carried a truth that demanded courage from both the one who spoke and the one who listened. He knew he would never forget this night. From then on, he promised himself to listen more closely, to take fear seriously, to remember that sometimes the greatest difference begins with believing someone who dares to ask for help. And somewhere beyond the glass, the city moved on, unaware that one small act of belief had changed two lives forever.